I need to inform you that I've met someone else. Someone better. I won't be attending our wedding next month. I wish you well. That was the entire email from Ethan, sent at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 32 days before our wedding. I stared at my phone screen, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop, as my world tilted sideways. 3 years together, 8 months of engagement, and hundreds of I love yous, all dismissed in 4 sentences. My name is Alyssa Reynolds, and I'm a 30-year-old interior designer in Boston. Until that morning, I thought I was living the dream. Successful career, beautiful downtown apartment, and engaged to a man I believed was my soulmate. Ethan and I met at a charity gala where his investment firm was a major donor. He swept me off my feet with his charm, intelligence, and what I thought was genuine kindness. Looking back, I should have seen the signs much earlier. The expensive gifts he couldn't quite afford. The late-night work meetings that left his collar smelling of unfamiliar perfume. The way he'd get defensive whenever I asked about our joint account's unusual charges. But love has a way of making you ignore the red flags, doesn't it? Even when they're waving right in front of your face. "Have you seen this?" I texted my best friend Rachel, forwarding Ethan's email. Her response was immediate. "I'm coming over. Don't do anything yet." Rachel found me still sitting at my kitchen island, now surrounded by wedding invitation samples that had arrived that morning. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Join us in celebrating our love," printed in elegant gold foil on cream paper, while my phone displayed the death certificate of our relationship. What kind of coward breaks up over email? Rachel's voice shook with anger. "After everything you've done for him?" She was right about that part. I'd supported Ethan through his temporary financial difficulties, helped him network for better clients, and even agreed to postpone buying our own place so he could invest more in his business ventures. But here's what Ethan didn't know. I wasn't as naive as he thought. For the past 3 months, I'd been quietly documenting his suspicious behavior. The engagement ring he'd given me, supposedly a family heirloom? I'd already discovered it was a recent purchase from a luxury resale shop, and I'd sold it 2 weeks ago when I found lipstick on his dress shirt that he couldn't explain. The money from that ring was sitting in a separate account, waiting. For what, I hadn't been sure, until now. The numbness was wearing off, replaced by something sharper, more focused. Ethan thought he could simply email his way out of our life together? He was about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating the wrong woman. The weeks leading up to Ethan's email had been filled with signs I couldn't ignore anymore. Like how he'd started taking calls in the hallway, his voice dropping to a whisper. Or the way his stories didn't quite add up. Business dinners at restaurants that were closed those nights. Conferences that weren't showing up on his company's calendar. Each suspicious moment felt like a small stone in my shoe, irritating but not quite painful enough to stop walking. I'd met Ethan's parents several times, both of them beaming with pride over their only son. His mother, Susan, had taken me shopping for wedding dresses, tearing up as I tried on a lace gown that cost more than my first car. His father, James, had pulled me aside at our engagement party, telling me how happy he was that Ethan had finally found the one. Now I wondered if they knew about their son's double life, or if they were as fooled as I had been. Looking back, the changes began around March. Ethan started working later, claiming his firm was handling a big merger. But one night, I'd bumped into his colleague Mike at the grocery store. "Merger? We haven't had any major deals since January," he'd said, confusion clear on his face. When I mentioned this to Ethan, he'd accused me of spying on him, turning it around so somehow I was the one breaking trust. That night, I couldn't sleep. While Ethan snored beside me, I opened his laptop, something I'd never done before. His password was still my birthday, which should have been touching but now felt like laziness. What I found made my stomach churn. Emails to real estate agents about viewing properties in Chicago, searches for jobs in the Midwest, and most telling, dozens of messages to someone named Claire. "I can't stand the guilt anymore," one email read. "I deserves better than this, but I can't help how I feel about you." The timestamp showed 3 a.m., sent on a night he'd told me he was working late at the office. That's when I decided to sell the ring. I remembered how proud he'd been giving it to me, spinning a story about his grandmother wearing it through 50 years of marriage. The truth came out when I had it appraised. It was barely 2 years old, purchased from an upscale consignment shop. The $15,000 I got for it felt like insurance, protection against whatever storm was coming. Rachel's voice pulled me back to the present. "Earth to Alyssa," she said, waving her hand in front of my face. "What do you want to do about the vendors? The venue deposit?" I took a deep breath, my mind surprisingly clear. "First, I need to make a phone call," I said, pulling up the contact information for Thomas Hayes, a private investigator recommended by a client. Then we're going to find out exactly who this someone better is. Meeting Thomas Hayes felt surreal. His office was nothing like the dim, smoky spaces you see in movies. Instead, it was modern, bright, and professional. He listened intently as I laid out what I knew, taking notes on a sleek tablet. "So this joint account?" he said, gesturing at the bank statements I'd brought. "These charges here, $4,800 at Peninsula Hotel, $3,200 at Tiffany's. None of these were for you?" "Not a single one," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "And they all happened on days he claimed to be at work conferences or client meetings." Thomas nodded, his expression neutral but focused. "And you said he's planning something in Chicago?" "That's what his email suggested, but I only saw glimpses before I lost my nerve about snooping." I pulled out my checkbook. "I have $15,000 from selling the ring. Will that be enough?" "More than enough," Thomas assured me. "I'll start with his financial records and recent travel patterns. Give me a week." That week felt like the longest of my life. I threw myself into work, grateful that interior design required enough focus to keep my mind occupied. My clients never suspected that their normally cheerful designer was tracking her fiancé's betrayal between choosing paint swatches and ordering custom furniture. Then Thomas called. "Can you meet today?" His office felt smaller somehow as he spread photos across his desk. Ethan entering high-end restaurants with a tall brunette, the same woman getting into his car, receipts for flights to Chicago, hotel stays, jewelry. "Her name is Claire Winters," Thomas explained. "She's a pharmaceutical sales rep he met at a networking event last year. They've been seeing each other since March. March. The month everything started changing. "There's more," Thomas continued, pulling out financial records. "Mr. Bennett has been living well beyond his means. Credit card debt, personal loans, even some gambling debts. It seems he's been using your joint account to maintain appearances with both relationships." My hands shook as I looked through the evidence. Ethan had spent thousands wining and dining Claire while using my money to cover his tracks. The Chicago plans weren't just about love. He was running from debt collectors, planning to start fresh with Claire in a new city. "What are my options?" I asked. Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Well, that depends on what you want. We have enough here to cause serious problems with his firm. They have strict policies about financial disclosure. We could also ensure Claire sees these credit reports and collection notices. Or we could do something more strategic. Make him face everything at once, his lies, his debts, his carefully constructed house of cards. But it would need to be handled carefully." I thought about Ethan's dismissive email, his casual cruelty in discarding our relationship. A plan began forming in my mind. "Tell me more about being strategic," I said. The first phase of my plan started with a simple text to Ethan. "I accept your decision. I just need you to come get your things." His reply was almost insultingly quick. "I'll send movers next week." "No," I responded. "There are personal documents and family photos. You need to come yourself. Friday at 6. While waiting for Friday, I stayed busy. Thomas had discovered that Claire's company had strict policies about dating clients, and guess who had recently signed a major contract with her firm? I also learned that Ethan's boss, Richard, was a stickler for ethical behavior, especially after a recent financial scandal at their firm. I invited Rachel over to help me set the stage. We arranged Ethan's things neatly, including printouts of his secret emails with Claire, bank statements showing his extravagant double life, and photos from Thomas's surveillance, all sitting innocently in labeled boxes. At 5:55 p.m. on Friday, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find not just Ethan, but Claire beside him. My heart lurched, but I kept my expression neutral. She was beautiful, I had to admit. Tall, elegant, and looking very uncomfortable. "So, I thought it would be better if we were honest about everything," Ethan said, his usual confidence wavering slightly at my lack of reaction. Claire wanted to... "Perfect," I cut him off. "You're both here. Come in." They followed me into the living room, where Richard, Ethan's boss, was already sitting on my couch. The color drained from Ethan's face. "Richard, what are you—" "I invited him," I said calmly. "Since we're being honest about everything. Those boxes are yours, by the way. Feel free to look through them." Claire reached the first box before Ethan, pulling out the credit reports and collection notices. Her perfectly maintained composure cracked as she read through them. "What is this?" she demanded, turning to Ethan. "You said you were financially secure. You said—" "There's more," I interrupted, gesturing to the other boxes. "Like the records of how he used my money to fund your dates, and documentation of how he violated his firm's financial disclosure agreements. Oh, and Claire? Your company might be interested in how you've been dating a client." Richard stood up, his face thunderous. "Bennett in my office, 8 a.m. Monday." "This isn't what it looks like," Ethan stammered, but Richard was already walking out. Claire grabbed her designer bag. "You told me you were practically single, that she was just a convenient financial arrangement. You said—" She stopped, tears streaming down her face, and rushed out. Ethan stood alone in my living room, surrounded by evidence of his deceptions. "Alyssa, please, I can explain everything." "No need," I said. "Your email was quite clear. You found someone better, remember? Although I'm not sure she thinks so anymore." Ethan paced my living room, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "You had no right to do this," he sputtered, his composed facade crumbling. "You went through my private information, hired someone to follow me? Just like you had no right to drain our joint account buying gifts for Claire?" I kept my voice steady. "Or use my credit card points for your romantic getaways." He grabbed one of the boxes, rifling through documents. "This could ruin me," he said, his voice rising. "Richard is going to fire me. Claire's company will blacklist me. How could you be so vindictive?" "Vindictive?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You ended our 3-year relationship by email, Ethan. You were planning to abandon me with wedding debt while you started fresh in Chicago. And I'm vindictive?" His expression shifted, trying to find the charming smile that had once made me weak in the knees. "Look, I know I handled things badly, but we can fix this. I'll break it off with Claire. We can work something out with Richard. Just help me clean up this mess. The same way you helped me plan our wedding while apartment hunting with another woman." I pulled out my phone, showing him screenshots of his real estate searches. "Or the way you helped me pick out wedding invitations right after booking a romantic weekend with Claire?" "That's different," he protested weakly. "I was confused. I made mistakes." "No," I said firmly. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying the wrong thing in an argument. You orchestrated an entire double life. You lied to everyone, me, Claire, your firm, even your parents." The mention of his parents made him flinch. That's when I delivered the final blow. "They know, by the way. I sent them copies of everything yesterday. Your mother called me this morning crying. She wanted me to tell you she's devastated. Not just about Claire, but about the gambling debts, the lying, all of it." Ethan sank onto my couch, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face ashen. For the first time, I saw him clearly, not as the successful, confident man I'd fallen in love with, but as someone who'd built his entire life on deception. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Money? An apology? Name it." I walked to the door and opened it. "I want you to leave. Take your boxes. You'll need those documents for the meetings I'm sure are coming up. Your firm's HR department, Claire's company's legal team, the debt collectors, they'll all want to talk to you. Alyssa, please. Goodbye, Ethan. I hope she was worth it. After Ethan left, things moved quickly. Within a week, he'd lost his job. Apparently, Richard had been looking for a reason to let him go, and my evidence provided several. Claire's company launched an ethics investigation, forcing her to resign. And those Chicago real estate agents? They weren't too happy when they learned about Ethan's financial situation. I threw myself into work, grateful for understanding clients and endless design decisions that needed my attention. But late at night, when my apartment felt too quiet, doubts would creep in. Had I gone too far? Was I just as bad as him, plotting revenge instead of walking away? Then I'd remember his email. 4 cold sentences dismissing our entire relationship, the countless lies, the money he'd spent on Claire while telling me we needed to budget carefully for our future. A month after the confrontation, I met Thomas for coffee to close out his investigation. I thought you'd want to know, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Ethan's moved back in with his parents in New Hampshire. His father's trying to help him sort out the debt situation, but it's worse than we initially thought. The gambling wasn't just casual. He has some serious markers out there. I nodded, not sure how to feel. And Claire? Took a job in California. From what I can tell, she wants nothing to do with him. Thomas paused. You know, in my line of work, I see a lot of people seeking revenge. Most of them go about it all wrong. They let emotion drive them to do things that only hurt themselves in the end. But you simply expose the truth. Everything that's happened to him is a direct result of his own actions. Sometimes the truth is the best revenge, I said, thinking about how freely Ethan's lies had flowed, how easily he'd maintained his deceptions. I just made sure everyone saw it at once. Thomas smiled. Well, your retainer still has some money left. Want me to keep tabs on him? I thought about it, then shook my head. No, I'm done. He can figure out his own life now. As I walked home, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Lunch tomorrow? That new place on Newbury Street? My treat. I smiled, remembering how she'd stood by me through everything. That's when it hit me. The weight I'd been carrying, the constant tension in my shoulders, was gone. Ethan's betrayal had broken my heart, yes, but it hadn't broken me. Instead, it had shown me just how strong I could be. The truth was my weapon, and I'd wielded it perfectly. Ethan had thought he could simply press send on an email and walk away unscathed. Instead, his carefully constructed house of cards had collapsed, leaving him to face the consequences of every lie he'd told. The next few months brought changes I never expected. Without Ethan's constant drain on my finances, my savings grew rapidly. I started taking on more high-end design projects, clients who appreciated my eye for detail and trusted my judgment. My portfolio expanded, and with it, my confidence. One morning, while grabbing coffee at my usual spot, I ran into Richard, Ethan's former boss. He'd been instrumental in the aftermath of my revelation, though we'd never discussed it directly. Alyssa, he said warmly, how are you holding up? I stirred my latte, considering the question. Actually, I'm doing really well. Better than I expected. He nodded, then hesitated. Listen, I should have told you this sooner. We'd been investigating Ethan's accounts for months before everything came out. There were irregularities we couldn't ignore, but we had no idea about the personal side of things. You, Claire, the gambling. You did us a favor, bringing it all to light at once. I just needed the truth to come out, I replied. Everything else was just consequences. Well, speaking of consequences, Richard continued, we're redesigning our office space, all 40,000 square feet. Would you be interested in submitting a proposal? Your reputation in the design community is excellent, and after everything, well, let's just say I trust your attention to detail. That project became my biggest yet, a complete corporate office overhaul that would put my firm on the map. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ethan's downfall had led to my biggest professional breakthrough. My parents, who'd been heartbroken about the wedding cancellation, now proudly told friends about their daughter, the successful businesswoman. Mom even confessed that she'd never fully trusted Ethan. Something about him was too polished, she said, like he was trying too hard to be perfect. Rachel convinced me to start dating again, though I was hesitant. Not everyone is hiding a secret life, she insisted. And now you know the red flags to watch for. She was right about the red flags. I found myself noticing things I might have overlooked before. Inconsistencies in stories, subtle manipulations, the way some men talked about their exes. Each observation felt like a small victory, proof that I'd learned from my experience rather than being broken by it. The last ties to Ethan unraveled slowly. His mother called one last time, apologizing again for her son's behavior and returning a family necklace I'd left at their house. I donated all the wedding items we'd collected. No point in keeping reminders of a bullet dodged. The save the date cards, the venue deposit, the carefully chosen color swatches, all of it went away, making room for new possibilities. Sometimes, usually late at night, I'd think about Claire. Had she been as fooled as I was? Did she lie awake wondering which parts of her relationship with Ethan had been real? I hoped she'd found her way to a better life too, free from his web of deception. The engagement ring money, my inadvertent escape fund, turned out to be seed money for expanding my business. I hired 2 junior designers and moved into a proper office space. Every time I signed a new client contract or approved a design concept, I thought about Ethan's dismissive email. He'd thought he was ending my story, but really, he'd just freed me to write a better one. Almost a year after Ethan's email, I received an unexpected message from Claire. She was back in Boston briefly and wanted to meet. I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else, and we arranged to meet at a quiet cafe away from the business district. She looked different from that day in my apartment, less polished but somehow more real. She'd cut her long hair into a practical bob and traded her designer clothes for simple business casual. We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence until she finally spoke. "I've been wanting to thank you," she said, turning her cup slowly. "Not just for exposing Ethan, but for doing it the way you did. All at once, with everyone present. It was humiliating at the time, but it was like ripping off a bandage, painful but quick." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "How are you doing now?" "Better, much better. The job in California was a fresh start. I'm dating someone new, an architect. He's real, no hidden life, no secret debts. Just an honest man who actually cares." She paused. "I heard through mutual friends that Ethan tried to contact you?" "He did," I confirmed, remembering the desperate voicemails and emails that had started arriving about 6 months after the confrontation. "I never responded." "Me neither," Claire said, "though he tried hard enough. Sent flowers to my office in San Francisco, called my parents, even tried to reach me through LinkedIn." She shook her head. "It's like he still doesn't get it. He's not sorry for what he did, he's just sorry he got caught." We talked for almost 2 hours, filling in the gaps in each other's stories. Her version of Ethan had been completely different from mine. He'd played the role of a successful single businessman, telling her his long hours were due to building his own investment portfolio. He'd even hinted at marriage, all while planning a wedding with me. "You know what the strangest part is?" Claire said as we prepared to leave. "In all the time we dated, he never once let me see his place. Always had an excuse, renovations, bad timing, nosy roommate. Now I know why." I laughed despite myself. "He told me he was renovating his office for 6 months straight. I guess juggling lies gets complicated." Before we parted, Claire handed me an envelope. "These were in my things. I thought you might want to decide what to do with them." Inside were photos of Ethan and me from happier times. Parties, vacations, casual moments I hadn't known were photographed. I'd appeared in the background of pictures meant to capture his time with Claire. I dropped the envelope in the first trash can I passed. Those memories, like Ethan himself, no longer had any power over me. My life had moved in a different direction, one with more honesty, success, and genuine relationships than I'd had when I was planning a future with him. That evening, I had dinner with Rachel and told her about meeting Claire. "You both dodged a bullet," she said, raising her glass. "Here's to seeing through the lies and coming out stronger." I clinked my glass against hers, thinking about how far I'd come. "Here's to knowing your own worth," I added, "and never settling for less." Looking back now, I can hardly recognize the woman who received that cold email from Ethan. She was someone who thought love meant accepting lies, who measured her worth through someone else's eyes. The journey from that morning to where I am now wasn't easy, but it transformed me in ways I never expected. My design firm has flourished beyond my wildest dreams. The project for Richard's company led to other corporate clients, and I've had to hire 3 more designers to keep up with demand. Last month, a prestigious design magazine featured our work on their cover. A beautiful restoration project that perfectly captured my philosophy of blending elegance with authenticity. The money I got from selling Ethan's ring turned out to be the best investment I ever made. Not just financially, but emotionally. It taught me to trust my instincts, to act decisively when something feels wrong. That lesson has served me well in business and in life. Rachel jokes that I should thank Ethan for setting me free, but I don't give him that much credit. My success came from choosing myself, from refusing to let his betrayal define me. Instead of drowning in hurt and anger, I channeled those emotions into building something meaningful. Sometimes new clients ask about the ring-shaped tan line that's still faintly visible on my finger. I used to feel embarrassed, but now I tell them the truth. It's a reminder of when I chose truth over comfortable lies, strength over safety, and self-respect over settling. That fading mark represents not what I lost, but what I gained: my independence, my confidence, and most importantly, my belief in myself. Last week, I was meeting a new client at the same restaurant where Ethan first proposed. As I waited for her to arrive, I caught my reflection in the window. Confident, successful, at peace. The hostess recognized me and mentioned that Ethan had been in recently, looking worse for wear, trying to impress a date with stories about his upcoming business ventures. Some things never change. But I have. The woman who once desperately tried to understand his lies now runs a thriving business built on transparency and trust. The engagement ring money that was meant to bind me to him instead set me free. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor that way. Rachel tells me I should write a book about my experience, but I don't think that's necessary. Instead, I share my story with other women who come to me feeling trapped or betrayed. I tell them what I wish someone had told me, that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best version of yourself. I still believe in love, but now I know it should never require you to compromise your integrity or ignore your instincts. Real love builds you up. It doesn't tear you down. It's based on truth, not carefully constructed lies. The tears and heartbreak of that Tuesday morning email feel like another lifetime now. In choosing to fight back with truth rather than sink to Ethan's level of deception, I found my own strength, and that, more than any revenge, has been the sweetest victory of all.